All right. Welcome to Goddess Vibrations, a spiritual sexual empowerment show. This is Natasha, Edwina. We are back after a decent hiatus, time of healing. And I am back with the beautiful Felicia Gualda, who is an energy master, an energy mentor. And we're going to talk about a very curious phenomena, which is breaking through your upper limit without self-sabotage. So there's this interesting thing that happens when we're just about to reach the pinnacle of our career or a goal or something we've been working on for a long time, and maybe we injure ourselves, or we just make a fool of ourselves, or we get sick, or something like that happens. And the answer can actually be in your subconscious mind, totally unconscious. You don't realize what's going on with the energy. So we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about all the ways it can inhibit you in relationships, with pleasure, enjoying the good in life, even sexually, all of these things. So Felicia, over to you. Tell us a little bit about your background, what you do for folks, and how you got interested in this topic.
Yeah. Well, first, I just think this topic is such an important conversation to have, because it's something that all of us are going to face at some point if we're wanting to make, massive shifts or changes in our life. So I just feel really excited to be here and to be able to share and go back and forth and see what comes through today. So a little bit about myself. I'm an energy mentor, as you said, which there's no real box that you can put that in, but I will say that my background is in a lot of healing work. So specifically attachment repair, how to heal relationships and how we learn to bond, how that impacts our relationship, not just to people in our adult lives, but to really every component, every aspect of our life. So if we get into a place where we can look at what's happening internally in the energetics, we can actually shift our reality first within ourselves, embody something new, and then let the material world respond to that as an inevitability. So I help people to connect with their energy field and to start to allow their awareness, their consciousness, to break out of these ego parts or these small selves and into a wider, larger, deeper, more expansive experience of reality, where they can live in alignment with their soul's purpose, with their heart's calling, and be able to create from that place, whether that's in relationships, business, finances, whatever it is that they're focused on in their life. And often they all interweave together anyways. Mm-hmm. So it's about how to come into a really, really grounded place where all of those things can occur from a very effortless place, where everything feels energy rich, and they're able to face a lot of the challenges of their life with way more ease than if they were living inside these small aspects of self. Yeah, that's in a nutshell. And there's so much more I could say, but
we could have
I can do to sum it.
we could have a lot to say about that. I truly believe, I took an energy medicine course in my PhD, and it blew my mind. It blew my mind just to know how deep and powerful the science is, but then all of the stuff that we don't tend to, the mainstream maybe doesn't believe in or doesn't really trust, because you can't feel it, you can't see it, and tangibly you feel it once you become more sensitive to it. But it's becoming sensitive to this energy is sort of a lot of what we talk about on this show is energy medicine, but it's also sexual energy and sensual energy. And as women, we want to be very sensitive to energy, because then we get to feel more pleasure, right? We're really enlivening all of our nerve endings and our senses. And I also feel that dealing with the energy is the pathway to healing. It's quick, it's instantaneous, it goes deep, it's gentle. I do hypnosis, that's working with the energy of the subconscious mind, also using microcurrent devices. So I just feel this is, I want to say, the wave of the future, but it's been around for a really long time, even from the time of Jesus, putting hands on healing and that sort of stuff, right? Yeah. So really interesting topic. And I know with this upper limit program, we were talking about all the different examples of, unconscious self-sabotage with this upper limit program. or problem. And you were saying, oh, I have my own personal examples in my relationships. So I was wondering, or in your relationships, and I was wondering if you'd be comfortable starting there, since this show is a lot about relationships, not only human relationships, but interconnections of thing, which is energy medicine. So maybe we can see if some of our viewers can relate to some of the things that you've gone through and what that looks like.
Yeah, and I really like that we're talking about relationships first, because I think when a lot of people hear upper limits, they might think of like in their business or with finances and with money and all these things that are so concrete, like hitting a goal, right, that we can measure. So I like that we're actually starting with something that's a little bit more intangible, right? Like, how do you measure relationships exactly? But we do know that if you're existing in a reality where there's a lot of struggle in relationship, a lot of conflict, a lot of, maybe there isn't a relationship that's coming into your reality, then the upper limit or the next layer of reality would be coming into a relationship that actually feels really intimate and connected and grounded, where each partner is really seen and honored and respected, and they can see each other's worlds, right? And find this like really intimate place to rest into. So yes, we can start with relationships.
I love that definition, because so often people define relationships by how long you're married, or if you're married, or if you're still married. And oh, we had a 50-year marriage, they must be successful. But I've seen like some really snarly long-term marriages, so it's like being able to tolerate a whole bunch of nonsense is not my definition of success necessarily. There are long-term happy marriages that I've seen as well, but I really like the definition that you just gave, as far as like the partners in the relationship feeling seen and heard and valued and living their authentic life, basically.
Yeah, because I think often what will happen is we're so conditioned to think that like if we get the job, if you get the relationship, if you get the house, then things will be good then. But what we don't consider often is, even when you get into the relationship, if you haven't worked through a lot of what's held from your past, and that gets held in the tissues of the body and our emotional field, all of that, then it's going to come out in the current relationship. So in my mind, it's like that's just like a next level of where you can really, really start to work through a lot of this stuff, not just by yourself, but now in partnership too. So for me,
like the beginning of the partnership is where the journey starts, as far as healing the trauma, right? It's like, oh shoot, like I could easily not see this by myself, but now that I'm in this partnership, and especially like the stronger the love relationship, the more like you're triggered, the more triggers come up, right? And it's like showing you all of those things, all those issues, like you said, coming out of the tissues. And then I think where people go wrong is they're like, oh, this person's just not right for me, or this relationship, it should always be peaceful, we shouldn't argue, which is absolutely not true. I can say that as a licensed marriage and family therapist. It's just there's fighting fair, and there's productive arguments. They need to happen. You're going to have conflicts, you're going to have disagreements. In fact, that is like that polarity conversation, right, where we're actually creating a charge, and that's how we get to our most authentic expression, is by telling the truth. And we're not always going to agree about our truths, right?
Yeah, and I know for me, one thing that's been true for my fiance and I is, well, first, it's like we've both done work on our own before we came into this partnership. And you reach a certain level where you're like, okay, like I've got so much of this figured out, right? I feel peaceful, I feel grounded. And then you come together and there's a whole nother facet of what it is to do this work while in relationship, and that then applies to all of the things you're in relationship to elsewhere in your life, because we can't just sit in a cave somewhere and meditate and then feel like that's the thing. So when we start doing a lot of this inner work and spiritual work and relationship, there's a lot of really cool places that you can go, and it brings up the stuff, right? So I know for my partner and I, there's some stuff we'll move through together, but when there's a lot of charge through something, or a lot of emotion, or like something feels like a piece that you really feel like you want to defend, those are actually the places where we'll say, oh, okay, there's actually something that I'm carrying personally that is unhealed, that actually needs to be presence and shown compassion and acceptance and love. And if we can't do that for each other in the moment because it's too personal, then those are the times that we'll actually go see like different practitioners or different people within the network that we've created to say, hey, there's actually a lot of content that's alive for me here. I have a lot of emotion with it. I'm guessing it's something I'm carrying from my past. Will you sit with me so I can actually allow myself to go deeper into this experience and feel some of the places that maybe have never been seen before without it actually bumping up against somebody else's stuff. And that actually allows it to process all the way through. Then we'll come back into our relationship together. There's a lot less charge and we can actually have a conversation without our stuff kind of bouncing back and forth against each other. And then we can resolve whatever needs to be resolved and just create like a new framework for operating together and whatever the thing was that was charged, you know?
Yeah. And quick side note, like that does so relate also to what we were talking about when we first met, which is tribe, the importance of tribe and community and having those outlets, even, whether it's a professional that you're going to in a professional community that you've created, or a very good mentor, friend, someone who can, be a safe person to talk to about some of these emotions and feelings. And because of our natural instinct to self-care and to relieve anxiety, sometimes there's this thing that happens, which is, I like to call it shadow polyamory, which is you think you're polyamorous, but really you just don't tolerate anxiety well. And so you have to go running into the arms of someone else to relieve the anxiety of the trigger that came up with the other person or your primary partner. And it's not a relationship dynamic that comes from an overflow of love and spaciousness in your life. It's coming from a scarcity and, oh my gosh, this is too intense and I gotta, decrease the anxiety. But it's the same thing. You're using now another relationship or another partnership to self-medicate in the same way that you would go to alcohol or overwork or something else to relieve the temporary anxiety, oftentimes creating an even bigger issue. So anyway,
wow, no, that makes a lot of sense. I've never heard that before, but I mean, I get it. It sounds like it's the intention behind the action that matters, right? So if the intention is, well, something came up with my partner, I want to get away from this feeling rather than be with it, allow it to be felt so that it can actually move all the way through the system and resolve. It's more like, I don't want to feel this. Where else can I go? And then in that case, it's almost like a part of ourself hijacks the system, and whatever it does from that place, whether it like looks like a beneficial thing or not, whether it's like, right, going to another partner or going to the gym to blow off some steam, if we're doing it with the intention of how do I like get away from this feeling, then it's going to resurface somewhere else. Whereas if we're holding the intention of, I like to be in intimacy and openness, then part of that process and arriving in that place is actually allowing the self to feel some of the turmoil, right, that could have been preventing the intimacy in the first place. And that's where we get into self-responsibility, right, and being able to actually take ownership of whatever the feelings are that are coming up without making it all about the wrong thing that the other person did, right?
Well, yeah, and you said it well when you said digest. I used the word digest. You said, or I think you said digest or process, but I'm pretty sure you said digest. And
something along those
lines. when you go to a professional or a healthy third party, like triangles do alleviate initial anxiety, and that's the natural tendency. It's like, oh my gosh, this is too stressful. I'm triggered. I don't like this feeling in my nervous system. I have to do something right now to relieve the anxiety. And so a healthier choice is like going to see you or going to see me or going to see, somebody that is a professional that can help them, or like I said, a good friend. And then, the unhealthy choice would be like cheating or taking a lover and using them, or to temporarily relieve your anxiety, but not digesting it, actually creating an even bigger anxiety that's just going to come right back around because it hasn't been digested, it hasn't been processed, it hasn't been faced. Because when you go to a professional, you're going to go and have this awareness, get rid of the charge, come back, and then have that conversation, right, to your partner. And what happens, we're primed to do this too, because in our family of origin, there's always triangles in a stressful system. So it might be like, I have a mom and a sister. And so if somebody's mad at somebody, they don't talk to the one directly. They talk to the, sister's mad at me. She'll talk to mom. Mom will tell me sister's mad at me. I'll tell mom sister did this. I should get back to sister. And it's just like, just call me sister, like that sort of thing. And so it's like, we need to have that direct conversation rather than trying to get the messages going through triangles, because it's a problem. But
yeah, and I think that's where tribe comes back in too, right? Is when, let me think about this. How do I want to share this? I just lost my stream of thought on that one.
Oh, well.
No, I hate when that happens.
Yeah, no, it's it's kind of that energy today. Everybody I've been talking to is like kind of low energy and tired today. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I've actually been feeling that today too, and hearing that. I heard something about a solar flare that's impacting.
Oh, the solar flares have been space storms and all that. That's been going on for a while. I think that's why I was having Wi-Fi issues. Maybe that's why you were having Zoom issues too. That makes sense. But yeah, you were going to say something about tribe and the triangles and why it's important to have tribe and community.
Yeah, I think part of it is like, we're meant to be interconnected, right? I think those are the way that our bodies are actually made. Like our biology is hardwired in a way where, as we're going through development and our nervous systems are forming, we're actually meant to be in like deep connection with our parents in a very like physical, energetic way. Where if we're feeling their like energetic, emotional state, and it's one of calm, soothing, like deeply nourishing and grounded, we'll get those signals and it will relax our system. And then it's like we template a program to be able to self-soothe. But a lot of us have parents or we're like, we don't have a lot of community around us, right, to be able to regulate with our nervous systems. So then if we have just a parent or one set of parents and they're really stressed out and anxious, which in our culture, we have a lot of that, right? We're very mind-based, fast-paced, not a lot of awareness in the body and pacing and groundedness.
And we also love to focus on others instead of ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah, right. So then you bring a little baby in, and there's this presence that's really needed to allow all these stages to complete through development. And if that doesn't happen, and it's anxiety that gets signal to the body and the nervous system, then we never actually get that program inside our body that tells us how to soothe ourselves. And so we're constantly still looking for that signal of safety and soothing outside of ourselves. And it will send us into, behaviors like we're talking about, like addictive behaviors or these strategies that aren't bad. We've labeled them bad as a culture, but really it's a technique to try to complete the program of soothing. So when we start bringing community and culture together, or community and people together who will have this shared intention of really healing and coming into this deeper sense of self, that's part of what can actually occur. Is the more of us that can hold presence for each other and have worked a lot of our stuff in our own system, like a lot of our backlog trauma, things that never got to be felt. And when we actually feel that, we become these like more clear, grounded space holders for other people's nervous systems to regulate with, so that it actually makes our bodies feel like it's safe enough to face some of that stuff. Because if we're just carrying it around by ourselves and we have no idea what it feels like to actually process it all the way through without trying to get away from it to the strategies, then it's like our bodies don't know we can handle it. So that's like part of the power of community, is we get to show each other that actually it is safe to face a lot of this stuff. It's not going to knock us out, for days or weeks on end. We can actually move through experience rather quickly when we have the support of another being.
Yeah, well, and not only another being, but so that you have that co-regulation as you're talking about, that a healthy, parent-child dynamic would have, but also I think a circle of safe, compassionate beings. I've found in doing groups that trauma heals much faster in a group dynamic when you're doing stuff that's somatic, like regulating the nervous system, and as well as digesting through words and processing through words, together, so that you kind of get the best of both, like the cognitive as well as the nervous system stuff. And then that relational mirror of these, of being witnessed and having these, and knowing these other people are sharing similar experiences, and you don't feel so alone, you're together, that sort of thing. I've noticed that trauma heals so much faster than I could do one-on-one. So I don't even do therapy anymore. Like, I do hypnosis one-on-one, I'll do coaching one-on-one, but I don't do therapy. I do this, this group work. And what you said too about, like, when you don't really heal the issue, and it's not like we think of it as a bad thing, like even substances or whatever, it is, like you said, self-soothing, it's coping, it's just unsustainable. It doesn't, it's not very effective. It just kind of numbs it for a while, but it doesn't actually do anything to unearth and reconfigure the problem. And so when we look at it, you can have something, again, like let's name a couple different behaviors that people probably wouldn't realize are actually just as kind of damaging. You could be cheating on your wife with a prostitute, you could be drinking, you could be smoking cannabis, you could be marathon training or marathon running. All of those things are simply self-soothing strategies that come from the same root issue. And none of those things are necessarily any better than the others when it's used to numb and run away from and avoid digesting or processing the energetic issue that's underneath it. And I think in our culture, we don't realize that because we don't take a deep enough perspective, like you said, to the interconnectedness of things. And we just think, oh, alcohol is good for the heart, or cannabis is good for anti-inflammatory, or running is really great cardio. But all of those things have side effects and consequences, if not used in the proper relationship with the healing, right?
Again, it's like, it's the intention behind the action, because it fuels whatever we're doing in the external world, like you're saying, whether it's something that our culture has labeled bad or good. If we're using it to cope, or we're using it to strategize, then there might be benefits from it, especially, let's say it's exercise or something. You may be getting the physical benefits, but it's not actually resolving
the issue. No, because you literally ran away from it. Yeah, you get the endorphins, you get all of that, but you don't resolve the issue until you come back to it. Yeah,
it's so true. I forget what you said, but there was something about relationships that I wanted to come back
well,
to.
I was interested to hear some of your stories about hitting upper limit problems or self-sabotage in relationships. Like, how has that showed up for you? I know I can think of a couple ways that I've self-sabotaged in relationships. It's usually early on. It's like usually in the dating stage. And sometimes I wonder if I'm just testing people, but it might be some form of self-sabotage. But how does it show up for you?
So for me, I mean, for a long time, I was even unaware that sabotage was a thing, right? I had the capacity to just look at the circumstance, and that was it, and say, oh man, all men suck. Right. Or like, this didn't go well, like that just sucks. Like, when is it going to work out? Right. You go into your head and all of your stories, like, do I need to move? Do I need to go somewhere else? Do I need to like date in a different way? Like, all these things come up, but it's all circumstantial. It's all like looking externally. So I didn't even recognize at that time that there was a common denominator in all of that, and so it had something to do with me energetically. And when I actually started doing this inner work and looking back at myself, you really start to discover a lot of what's happening, like both in the narrative in your head, what's happening in your body, in your emotional state, rather than looking outward at the circumstance. So I started doing a lot of this healing work. I went into a lot of attachment repair in a way that was really body based, like helping me to get into my body and feel some of what was actually there, some of the trauma that I had no idea. I was like living on a surface layer of just frustration, right? I hadn't even touched some of the like deep grief and sadness and fear and abandonment stuff and all of that underneath. I just didn't know. I didn't have the awareness. But once I started actually getting into that and unwinding all of it, the relationship showed up. And he's my fiance now. He's the love of my life. And truly, he was it was the first relationship that I had gotten into that actually felt very, very conscious and healthy. And, you know, we were both all in from the beginning, I think, from when we decided, you know, we were going to go all in and do this. And I remember there was a moment when we just had like an amazing date. I remember we were driving home. I felt so good. I could just feel like how deeply I love this man. I could feel his like devotion and care to me. And it felt so good. And then there was a moment when everything just turned. And I remember this so distinctly because it like shocked me. And also I could see like, oh, this is what people talk about as sabotage. It was so clear. All of a sudden I felt terror in my body. I felt so disconnected and disassociated. I started to like almost like cry in the car. And I was like, I need to like, what is happening? And I started watching my thoughts and I started having all these thoughts of like, this person's going to leave me. I don't deserve this. Like every negative thing you can possibly think of. But at that time, I'd done enough inner work to like be able to really just watch all of these experiences without getting really attached to them and like connecting all this meaning to it. And so I shared with him, I was like, oh my gosh, let me tell you what's happening right now. Like, I'm just feeling all these things and like I feel scared. And in that moment, like he actually needed to come in and reassure me and say, hey, like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. It's okay. Like, notice that we're okay. And it actually began to relax that experience because I let it move through me. Like, I actually let myself cry and let myself feel all of those things without being in resistance to it, which I think was a really important moment because it felt like my body and this survival primal system that likes familiarity, that likes sameness because it knows that it worked, was really, really, it was getting activated because I hadn't yet acclimated to the new reality. And I think that's often where we go unconscious and we just start to feel the feelings without just watching them. We go initially into this default mode of like, how do I get away from this feeling? And it happens so fast, sometimes we don't even recognize it and will unconsciously create circumstances that will push the person away, that will like make us go do something that would sabotage the relationship. So what I notice, if we really, really get curious and slow down, pause, and actually watch our experience, when something starts to feel uncomfortable, rather going into like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this because it's going so good, but we actually invite the experience in, it gives it space to actually metabolize, to digest. And in this case, actually needed the reassurance to like breathe, because it's like in those moments, it's like we fall asleep and a part of us forgets, doesn't realize that a good thing is really happening and it might be stable. If there's any templates or memories that we hold on to where things have gone otherwise, like trusting another being didn't work out, then it's like we'll go into that place where it's like high alert, high alert. So we let ourselves feel it and then be reassured in that moment. It's like that part of us gets to recognize that there's actually a new reality happening, that we're safe, that nothing bad is happening. And then the more times we permission the experience and either get reassurance from the other being, or we become that person for ourselves to reassure ourselves in the moment and notice that we're safe, then we actually can start to begin to stabilize in the new reality. But it's like letting all those things come to the surface consciously Does that make sense?
Totally. And I was going to say that clearly your partner also has a regulated nervous system and did his work, because in that moment he was able to reassure you and hold space and stay calm, rather than your upper limit problem and your, unconscious self-sabotage coming up, rather than having that trigger his doubt or his fear or his traumas, so it's like, because that's how we can bounce off of each other when we're both in that activated state, and then we just don't have the safety, and then we don't have the co-regulation. And so good on him for, being able to hold that space. And then the other part I was going to say is, I think we can all identify with that when we reach a new level, and we're like, whoa, this is like too good to be true. It doesn't feel comfortable. And I love what you said about just like moving through mindfully and just giving it the space and the time to digest. I always say, I have a saying that goes, if it's too good to be true, it's meant for you. So
I love that.
So it's like a reframe of like that feeling. And I think what also can be happening in that moment is actually 95% of the day, we are on autopilot. We're just kind of automatically going through the motions. And so we get into these comfort zones. But then once you reach, like you said, break through that threshold, or you get to that next level of like, whoa, life is awesome. This is pretty awesome. We are no longer in the comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're no longer in the comfort zone, the body and the nervous system does experience it as a shift, and maybe even like what might feel like a provocation or a high alert moment. So we're no longer, we're a little bit distressed in a good way. I mean, it's a good eustress, like a good stressor. We move out of our comfort zone. It's stressful, but it's good for us, and it takes us higher to transcend or whatever. But we can fall back on the automatic reactions that our family of origin had, or our parents did. So or a way that we responded under stress when we were younger, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as you were sharing, I was thinking of my own self-sabotage kind of upper limit moment that I successfully navigated through without sabotaging. And it's a relationship with my furniture, actually. It was such a silly thing. It surprised even me, but I have this beautiful antique teak wood, heavy as fuck piece of furniture right here. And there's another matching hutch that goes with it. And when I adopted this furniture, when it came into my life, it was offered to me. I mean, I did a trade for it, and I was like, that looks pretty grown up. Like that looks like some grown up furniture. And I went from like kind of being like a struggling college student to then being like a struggling graduate student to then being like a new mom with kids that had markers and stuff all over the walls and the furniture. And so IKEA is kind of my comfort zone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like stuff that doesn't mean too much. And I mean, this lamp is probably about $10, like 10, 12, 15 years ago. It's still holding up, but it's like, this is safe to me, right? To not have to like put so much into it. Also, I realized that growing up, it was me and my dad in my younger years, in my formative years, and he had a lot of job instability. So income was up and down, up and down. And so we moved a lot. Mm-hmm. And in my fourth grade year, was it fourth grade or third grade? I think it was third grade. I went to 4 different schools that year. Wow. And so I tend to be very shy, and I keep to myself because I never really had an opportunity to stay anywhere long enough to even build the intimate relationships and the friendships I might like to have. And then being just me with a single dad until I moved in with my mom and my siblings over there when I was 9. But before that, moving all the time. And so my whole adult life, I've moved almost every year. I moved to a new place. And I got married, and then we moved to a new place. There's always something. There was like mold in the house, or the neighbors were just annoying, or they sold the place, or there's always something, right? But it's what you're saying here. It's really the common denominator is what's the energy underneath. It looks like these outside circumstances. Mm-hmm. So here I am now, ironically, living in this condo right now, which was supposed to be the one place that I planned to stay for only a year. And I've been here for 8 years now. Just like, it's like, no.
Something.
Yeah. So my secure relationship is with my home. And I'm co-regulating with my home and my furniture. No, I'm joking, but this is kind of what it seems like things are happening here. Anyway, this furniture came in and I sat there on the couch and stared at it for about 2 weeks at least. And I felt my heart pounding. And it was just like, I felt nervous and sweaty. And I'm like, why am I so anxious about this furniture, this nice, new, heavy furniture being in my house? And I just had to, like you said, digest and feel and like talk myself down from the ledge. And it was really just this panic of, yes, I'm like moving to a place of more grown up, more like stability, a different phase of my life. But then also, if I needed to move, if the shit hit the fan, if something happened, I'm a single mom of 2, I can't even move that out of here by myself. All of this other, I realized I was unconsciously purchasing kind of like light furniture that if it came down to it, I could handle it myself to some extent, And so just, which again goes back to trauma, like having to do it all yourself or not having people that you feel like you can depend on, or, even as a child, I'm kind of like taking on the responsibility or feeling the weight of responsibility for even, my dad, not his job is kind of going up and down like this, and it took me a little while. It took me a little while to get through that. And so finally I'm like, well, I guess when I move from here, I'm just going to have to hire help or get movers or have somebody help me. I can't even probably move half of it. I can't even help anybody move that furniture now. But it was a similar process of, again, kind of a silly idea, but the feelings in my body were very, very real. And so if I was feeling that way about a piece of furniture, imagine, like I would say for our listeners, of course you're going to want to run away and freak out and sabotage your relationship because that's another human being. And that's like a big deal to actually be in the relationship of your dreams. Like you said, your fiance is the love of your life. When that person shows up, it's like, oh my gosh, is this real or am I going to be hurt again? And the other piece that I recognize about your story, this is so annoying that my camera keeps going fuzzy. I don't know why it's doing that. But the other piece that I heard in your story is that the two of you committed early on and you created that emotional safety and that physical and sexual safety in your relationship. And that commitment that so many people are afraid of, again, because of trauma, because of attachment wounds in childhood, that sort of thing, is so vital for doing the attachment healing. We need attachment of usually back in the day, the research was saying 5 years. I'm not sure if it's still that, but at least 5 years of a secure attachment.
Yep. Yeah, it's like 3 to 6 years is what I've heard. And I know for me, I think I'm going on year 6 of doing attachment work with myself, not only with my clients and all of that. And like, man, it makes a difference. Like to me, everything roots down to attachment because it's so primal, right? Yeah. It's like, those are the tracks that get laid down so early in our life. And sometimes it's before we can even remember. So it's like in your case, you actually had the memory of making all those moves, right? And instability in the home. And what I love about this work too, is when we really allow ourselves to feel what comes up in those circumstances, like with the dresser, that's enough. We don't even have to know exactly where it comes from, because often it comes from when we were 6 months old or like just born. There's like tracks that get laid down then that made us feel unsafe in relationship in some way. And so, I mean, it can be as simple as being born into a room that was really cold and bright lights and, people stressed out or exhausted around us. And we never make that initial connection of like, I've landed, there's a being here that's got me. It's safe on this planet. It's safe in the earth. And so something gets laid down in our system that says like, I don't know if it's okay. I don't know if relationships are okay. I don't know if I can trust it. So then we grow up and suddenly you meet a person and we have no idea why it tends to fall apart or we've sabotaged or whatever. And so part of unwinding all of that is like dropping the search for meaning, like dropping the where does this come from? Although it may actually present itself or you have an insight or memory somewhere along the way. Anyway, but the moment we drop that as like the primary focus and actually just allow ourselves to come into this really agendaless place of like, okay, something in me feels uncomfortable. I'm going to just allow myself to feel that, take a deep breath, like find a safe person to sit with me while I feel it without trying to change me or give me advice on what to do different in this circumstance, but just sit with me and let it metabolize all the way through. That's when we actually really start to heal and we stop recreating these scenarios where the sabotage happens or we have to keep moving, right? Or whatever the life circumstance is, it's the indicator that something's happening on a more internal level. Yeah, we get to do it from the ground up.
And that piece of having a safe person and just their presence, not saying anything, not trying to fix anything, but just like you said, sitting there and breathing with you, and their energy is calm and grounding. It's so underrated, right? Like we don't realize how that in and of itself can just allow the healing to unfold.
Yeah. And I think there's another part to it too. Like part of it is like actually metabolizing, right? Like we've been talking about digesting the experience, even if it's before a time we can remember. And the other part of it too that I think gets skipped a lot is once things move through, there's typically a little bit of relief and it will eventually turn into more of a state of well-being. But initially it's often just a state of like blank, which in reality is it's an uptick from the emotional charge or overwhelm that was there before. So what I always do with my clients and the people I work with is when that occurs, I'll actually point their awareness to it and be like, hey, do you notice you actually feel a little bit of relief in this moment? Do you notice you feel a little bit better? Because when we don't bring our awareness to that and it gets skipped, there may be another part of us that comes to the surface that's now scanning for the next thing that's wrong and looking for the next thing that's wrong. So it's okay that happens as long as we also bring in some of the awareness on those moments when it actually is feeling better. And the more we rest in that place too, allow our system to rest there, especially while we're co-regulating or with another person, what we're doing is we're actually growing our capacity for it to feel safe, to feel good. And that's what impacts the self-sabotage too, or it discreates it. Because if we feel safe in our body and our bodies know it's good, it's okay to feel good, then there's no reason for that part to come to the surface and scan for danger anymore. We've trained ourselves in a safe container, in a safe environment to know that it's okay to feel good, right? And we can't do it with our minds because of course our minds know we want to feel good, right? But our bodies aren't necessarily on board with that because remember, there's a primal component to it, right? And they want what's familiar. So we've actually got to familiarize them or got to familiarize our body with a good reality, with feeling calm, with being rather than doing. And it's uncomfortable at first because we find safety in doing and running our minds. So it's a practice and it's like creating consistency around that really, really helps to stabilize the new realities I've found, or at least a component of it.
100%. And now I feel the need to segue into sexuality and pleasure because everything you just said relates to the bedroom as well. And in particular with female sexuality, because, we can tend to get caught up in our minds and we don't, the male brain is more compartmentalized. So when the sex area is already lit up, he's pretty much there. And for women, we're all over at once, it's very interconnected. And so we can get lost in our thoughts and what you said about doing. It's like, oh, should I be doing this? Or what is he thinking of me? Or does he want me to do this? Or should I do this? Or if he doesn't do this, am I going to do that? But it's all, like you said, about being. It's like, how can you just slow it down? And I think for the male partners to understand that her brain needs to be tended to, and relaxation has to, and safety, just like an emotional crisis, any kind of nervous system trigger. Obviously sexuality is triggering the nervous system as well, in a good way, in a positive way, but it can also trigger other stuff, and fears, and tightness and tension, and not being able to let go. And there, what is that? That's, you can't cross the threshold over into the big O, like, and so that is also an upper limit problem, and can be self-sabotaged by overthinking, or worrying about the way that you look or smell or whatever else, or taste. And so understanding that it's, again, that co-regulation, the creation of emotional safety, physical safety. This is Gina Ogden's research too on female sexuality, and moment to moment experiences of feeling pleasure instead of some outcome or some thing that you're supposed to do, or they're supposed to do. It's like, what feels good moment to moment, and paying attention to that shift. There's no pace that you need to match, right? Except that typically in a sexual interaction, the woman is setting the pace, because she's the one that's going to be more variable, changeable. And then, this relates to polarity stuff too, and feminine, masculine energy.
Yeah. One thing that I really love, I don't remember where I heard this, but it just resonated so deeply, is that trust is earned moment to moment. So it's really a process, moment to moment, of being with what's arising, checking to see if it's okay, if our partner is attuned to us, if it feels safe, whether it's sexuality or otherwise. And being with that experience, and then checking again. And so safety is so huge, because if we're in our conscious mind and we feel distracted, or there's all these things, or you're constantly checking if this is right or that's right, or whatever it is, we can't force our minds to surrender. We can create the circumstances where our body feels safe enough to allow our mind to surrender. So we can actually bring in cues for ourselves of safety that allow that to happen. It's like we're adding to the moment rather than trying to change the moment. And then that allows things to become so much more like flowy and intimate and connected, because nobody is in a fight with the experience anymore.
100%. And I would even say, like, some people that, especially people that maybe have war, sexual assault, or violence, or things like that, they might not like the word surrender, but I say receiving, like allowing your body to get into that receptive mode where you can receive relaxation, you can receive the breath, you can receive awareness of, or you can receive sensations, that sort of thing. And I teach meditation, and then I do hypnosis at a wellness center, a luxury wellness center, and people will say, well, I'm overthinking, or I want to stop doing this, or I don't like this, and I don't want this anymore. I'm like, okay, awesome. And then we go in and do the hypnosis, and I don't mention any of that stuff, right? It's all about what we want the body to be doing instead. And so much of the process of being able to get into the hypnotic state, I always coach them, is being willing to relax, which is the surrender that you're talking about. It's like, are you willing to just allow, instead of having to control the outcome? But I find that most instances of control, again, relate back to trauma, childhood trauma, and not feeling safe, and not your environment being so chaotic that now you want to control every little thing.
Yeah. Well, and I like that you brought up control too. This is a piece that I've done a lot of personal work around. I grew up really like academic, where there's a lot of structure, right? And you have a lot of control over that. You know exactly what's happening. I played sports too, where there's like a lot of like, exactly what's happening. There's control in that. Like I can, there's an aspect there of structure. And so for me, there's a safety in that. So whenever I'm working with somebody, and that's a big piece that comes in, is there's a fear to surrender. It's also bringing in like, well, let's get to know the part of you that feels like it's controlling. And so rather than needing it to be different, it's like, well, that's there for a reason. Because if it was created in our childhood, it was created to protect ourselves, this controlling part of ourself, or this like controlling tendency. It's like the wisdom of that part of us is that it was like protecting the vulnerability that was underneath. If there wasn't a safe environment to actually process those emotions, there weren't safe people around, there was chaos, there was criticism, there was whatever the thing is. So really getting with, there was like there's we can honor that aspect. We can really, really look at it and say, thank you for being present, right? And the moment we say that and we mean it and it's genuine, it can actually begin to relax on its own. It's when we get in a fight with it and say, I hate this part of me, that it's like, okay, well, I'm feeling hatred come towards me. I need to protect from that. I'm going to put my heels down and actually get stronger. And then we go, why am I looping in circles? I hate this part of me. I need to work on it. I hate this part of me. I need to work on it. And we do that loop when we actually just need to shift the view and come into a place of, at the very least, curiosity. So interesting. I have a part of me that controls. I wonder what that part of me needs. And then really offering it to ourselves. And it might be as simple as bringing in these, like the meditation practices that you're pointing to, of can I point them to their breath? Maybe I can have them feel that their body is supported by the ground underneath them. Maybe I can notice that I'm sitting with another person. Do they feel calm? Do they feel like they're in acceptance of me right now? And like continuing to check out all of these circumstances around us in the present moment. And then it's like that information gets fed into this controller part of us, and it will find its timing and its pacing to relax on its own and give us access to some of these deeper experiences that want to purge, so we can have more space in our life to create the things that we actually want, right?
Well, what you're talking about is the deep transformative power of mindfulness, right? Of people underestimate such a buzzword now, mindfulness. So we should remember mindfulness. And that's it. Like slowing it down, the interesting, look at this, not having a judgment, being curious, the ground underneath you. Like so many, when you talk about this, you talk about like this academic background. When you talk about it in an academic way, it seems pretty underwhelming, right? But to actually do it, how many times do we actually embody what it is that we're being taught? Know it consciously, just like every Sunday preacher knows what he's supposed to be doing, but how many of them are actually, really truly embodying it and living their life to the same extent of what they're teaching or practicing? And I think that is probably the one of the greatest gifts of a healer or a teacher, is to be able to be that energy and allow the space for their client to do that too, because of the shift, the profound shifts that can occur.
Yeah, it's like coming to the self first and then going and being present for others as well.
Yeah, there was something else, and now I'm getting the brain fog. There was something else.
Solar flares.
Yeah, there's something else that I wanted to say to you as I was listening to you talk. Maybe if it'll come back at some point. I don't know if it's going to come back right now or it's going to come back much later. But yeah, just, gosh, I wish I remembered, because I thought it was pretty good to bring up. But yeah, I mean, this stuff, it just, the simplicity of it, but the power, and it doesn't work until you really start doing it. And again, going back to tribe and community, it can be, for me to really be able to practice this stuff, I got to get my ass in a circle. I got to pay some money to somebody, to make sure I show up and carve it out in my calendar. Otherwise it's too easy to like take on a new client, or do something for my kids that they're asking me to do, or whatever else. And then, you get through another week and you're like, wait a minute, I didn't do anything for myself, or I didn't take care of this need that I had. And so I think having these like-minded, safe, healer type circles are really important.
Yeah, I definitely could not agree with you more. And I've noticed, like, this is kind of how it's been in my own experience, is there's like so far that you can get in a like self to self stream, which is like a sitting practice, mindfulness, journaling, meditation, all of that, where you can start to unpack like a lot of these things on your own, and you can begin to open. It's I've heard it called the self to self stream. And then I found that there's limits to that, especially if we start getting into the attachment system, right? And so that's when perhaps you bring another in, like we've been talking about, right? Sitting with a being who can stay present with you without trying to fix you or change you or give you advice, or commiserate with you, but to actually be present and hold like a nice, compassionate, grounded space. And that's the self to other stream. And so there's places in us that we can reach and process that we might not be able to access on our own because there's too many protections, like the controller, right? The controller might be there going like, I don't have anything underneath this. I just feel anxiety. I just feel frustrated. When in reality, there's deep grief underneath that we maybe can't access until somebody else is with us permissioning that experience. So that's another place we can work. And then there's also the self to group stream, which is like Sangha, community, where you have like a whole interconnected network now of beings who are like mirrors all around you. And if you can be resting in community that's, familiar, but perhaps you're getting reflections back that are reinforcing places of your life that are in struggle, right? Like if you start getting into a habit of being in complaining about what's wrong, and then everyone else is complaining about what's wrong, and it feels like you're offloading a little bit, except for it's like the quick fix, just like the addictive behaviors. It's the same way with like relational behavior. So we can actually use that to our advantage and be like, oh, wow, we've actually been cycling in this way of being. So now if you begin to like surround yourself with community who can actually become a mirror and reflect back to you like, hey, look at all these things that are working. What can we celebrate together? Like what's going right in your life, and to be able to hold that reality too. Now it reconditions our system, our way of being, to be like, oh, I can actually recognize the good things in my life too. And I can be celebrated for that. I can actually be in community and maintain relationship while things are going well in my life. And it starts to make that reality familiar. And then as a byproduct of that, the more comfortable we are in that place with community, it's much safer to actually process the energy that was underneath the like complaining. If that's, that's one thing that I mean, that was a big one for me. That's how I would offload, as I complain about all the things that were wrong. Yeah. But what's underneath it, once I came more in community, could reflect back like what's right and what we can celebrate. It gave space for me to process and metabolize what was underneath all of the like complaining space, which was actually deep sadness and all the places where I hadn't been met in my life that needed to be felt and like discovered. And so it can be a like incredible benefit to have community with that too, right?
Yeah, I have. Well, first of all, this camera is kind of, did it go? No, it's still pretty blurry, huh? Let me just.
Yeah, it's kind of in and out a little.
I'm going to do this thing again. It might be the Wi-Fi, but I'm just going to shut it off, turn it back on. That's better. Speaking of complaining, no, so I remembered what I was going to talk about, and I thought of 3 things I want to bring up. Hopefully I'll remember all of them as you were talking. Really profound points. Thank you. One of them, when you talked about the controller again, that's what it was, is like the different parts of us. Like I found that parts work to be very powerful in hypnosis. So I'll talk to different parts of people in hypnosis and bring one part out and let another part kind of go to sleep, right? In coaching, we call it also the gremlin, the self-sabotaging saboteur, like let the gremlin go to sleep. You look at it as a different, like something outside of you. So that controller absolutely is sometimes just gets hypervigilant, who's protecting more of the caring, like vulnerable, wounded child part of us or whatever, that actually needs to come out and be on stage along with the controller, or at least take equal turns, so that you can have that healthy relationship connection and go deeper in intimacy, because you need to be vulnerable to be intimate. And so I think that's how you got onto mindfulness, as you were saying, you know, be mindful of these parts and how they interact, which also, you know, they're also archetypes. There's different archetypes that are constantly like a Rolodex is like, which one wants to come out today? Okay, for this situation, this one comes out. For this situation, this comes out. And so I've been really on that, I would say lately, but also for a long time, because I love the work of Carl Jung, and astrology is like all about archetypes. And there's 2 other episodes for the folks watching. There's one where actually I think both of the episodes are with Kirti, my co-host on the show, and one of them has to do with kind of the mother horror, or the Madonna horror complex, and how those are 2 archetypes within each and every woman, and it's places where we need to integrate it because society wants to separate it and say this woman's this and this woman's that. So I want to refer people back to that episode, and also the episode when you're talking about the controller. Kirti and I did an episode on befriending your inner bitch too, which is when the protector is asleep, instead of being hyper vigilant or overprotective, she's asleep, and she's like, oh, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, until it's very much not fine. And then she comes up like the and it's like overboard, right? So how do we befriend the inner bitch right away, right in the beginning, to be like, when she's calm and she's just being protective and setting the terms of the engagement, you know, and in the case of, like, let's say a relationship, that would be like having the talk about the structure of the relationship. Are we committed? Are we not committed? What's the, you know, are you dating other people? Should I date other people? This sort of thing. Like, that's really important to get those pieces online. Yeah, that was the parts work. And then I had 2 other points, and of course they're gone now too. They'll come up again. I'm trying to remember again what you were saying. So much good stuff. Yeah, anyway, it'll come back.
Yeah. I love your share. I think, to me, it's like the inner bitch is like discernment, right? Being able to acknowledge when something's off or out of alignment, and when something's in alignment. And I think part of how that can come online is actually, the more we look at our own experience and we allow ourselves to process the emotions, there's a clarity that arises from that, because we're no longer trapped inside suppressed emotion. We're no longer trapped inside the controller. So we can actually have the clarity of mind to say, actually, there's a real need that I have here. And so when we have the awareness of that, then we can actually articulate that to our partner, or to, you know, our boss, or our, like, whoever it is in our life. But often when we're so caught in the patterns, we don't have the awareness to actually acknowledge what the need is and communicate it. And so then from that place, if we get so clear on what our needs are, we can share that with the other from a place that's not charged. And then it can actually be received rather than hitting their defenses, and you construct a reality together.
And I think that does tie in also to the complaining that you were talking about, which was one of the other points. I want to talk about complaining.
Yes, remembered.
Yeah. Yes, I just got one more, then I win the game. There are 3 things. That's the second one. But yeah, like, you know, like you said, you're not really even aware of it. And then until you start complaining, grumbling, complaining, and now you're like, okay, this is maybe that's part of the awareness system. But also, I think you said something about tribe and community and how we need it to celebrate each other. And women in particular tend to love to complain, not only to each other, but to their partners. And this is one of the biggest complaints I get from men when I'm working with couples. And I don't know if you have the same, but one is, she just talks so much, like, and I don't know what to say. Can't follow her. It's really hard for me to understand what she's saying because she's all over the place. And then the other one is, she complains all the time. And I think when women are complaining to each other, it's almost this thing, like, if you look at it from a patriarchal lens, women have been repressed, oppressed, and there's this competition that is placed on women that is not natural. It's not our natural flow to be competitive. That's more of a masculine energy. And yet in a patriarchy, it's like a dog eat dog kind of structure and overly masculine. And now she sees another woman as her competitor instead of her collaborator or her sister or her potential ally. And, and then if she's maybe overcompensating for that, even, she doesn't want to look better than, less than, because there's a phrase that says, don't be a tall poppy or get your head chopped off. Right. And so if she actually celebrates herself and has the appearance of being a tall poppy, she's going to have all these women cut her head off, or men, in this sort of overly masculine culture that's based more on competition than collaboration. And I say overly masculine because obviously there's healthy competition and there's healthy collaboration. We've got to have it in balance, right? And so it's not often safe to be celebrating or to feel celebrated, because now it's like, wow, it feels good on some level to be acknowledged and seen and appreciated until you get your head chopped off, until you're stomped down, until you get, lots of different religions call it the evil eye of jealousy or whatever else. And for a woman, that can be crushing because we are such tend and befriend beings just from our biological essence of having wombs and being the portal between heaven and earth and responsible for growing and feeding another human being that comes out of our body. And so you can see how this complaining is an issue. And I think if men could understand sometimes where that's coming from in the deeper perspective of that, and I'm not saying that she should complain, but it's more so like him understanding where that comes from and being her ally now and helping her reframe and celebrate her and lift her up and praise her and put attention on her. And then, like you said, her getting into a tribe, and we can use any pronouns here, but I'm saying her just because it seems to be a bigger issue with the feminine, but getting into a tribe where she is celebrated and not sabotaged. Because talking about upper limit problems, it can be our own inner saboteur, or it can be one we manifest outside of us from that similar kind of energy, right? And so getting into, again, these safe circles where the philosophy, the guideline, the culture is, yes, we are here to uplift. And, and it's kind of like, this is the psychology that also works with animals, like training animals. You don't yell at a dog or hit them when they do something wrong. You're going to traumatize them, but you praise them and give them a treat when they did something right. Right? You're redirecting and then giving them something right. So of course, we should be sensitive and kind in doing this to our other humans too. And even with men, like the most powerful thing you can do to shape a man's behavior is to take away your attention when he's not doing what serves in that moment or is supportive to you or healthy, I should say. And praising when he is doing it right and giving him your attention when he is doing it right. But so much of our culture is based on this, again, overly masculine, patriarchal, domination, control, competition, complaining. Now he did something, I'm going to scream at him and tell him what he did wrong and everything that's wrong about him. And then the male ego is so sensitive. And I think it's because two reasons, in my personal opinion. I think it's firstly because he is just as sensitive emotionally or even more so than a woman, but he hasn't had the opportunity in this, again, overly masculine patriarchal culture to express it and be able to digest it and be still thought of as okay and right and healthy and normal and a man, so that's a problem again of how patriarchy hurts, or imbalance in a culture hurts both men and women. And then I think the other thing is a man's true essence is to please a woman and to make a woman happy. And I always say this, but even a man who is ignoring his girlfriend because he's working so much, or he's doing this or that or another, oftentimes it's so that he can financially support his future wife and family, even if, whether that's that girlfriend he's ignoring or somebody else. But he's really ultimately always wanting to please a woman. I know a friend who's a soccer coach that works with young kids. He said the girls, it's like, I like coaching the girls better. They're more disciplined, because once they get to middle school, the boys discover girls, focus is gone. Like I cannot, they are not disciplined anymore. They're just, because they're so wanting attention from and wanting to please the feminine. And so it's this interesting dynamic when we start to look at all the interlocking pieces. And then, as you know, like we shift our energy. That's really the most efficient, effective place to start, is to shift our own energy, because it does, as you said earlier, it's related to everything. It's related to the collective. It's related to our family. It's related to our community, our society. We can't change all of that outside stuff as effectively or as efficiently as we can change ourselves. And as long, because we're in control of ourselves. We're the only person we're in control of. And I think you also said that too, personal responsibility or radical responsibility or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, there were so many good things in it that you said. There was something earlier that you were sharing about competition that I wanted to circle back to, because I really, really like this conversation. Is, competition has been so conditioned into us, right? And you're right, it may have, like, we can label it like a masculine quality, and there's healthy competition and there's benefit in that. But then what happens when we start to see where in ourselves that actually lives too, like the unhealthy competition where we go into comparison, right? Because like actually recognizing the place that goes into comparison is an opportunity to work through that in order to, again, stabilize a new reality. So whether we have, maybe part of it is finding healthy mirrors like community, like we're talking about, who actually have the capacity to celebrate with us, to celebrate wins without going into competition. And when we recognize it in ourselves that we're going into competition, we can start to input practices that actually help us to become more comfortable to celebrate other women as well. And that actually is supportive to our own growth too, because we're taking out these limiters in our system that have been subconsciously conditioned in, that stop us from actually reaching these higher levels because of a fear of judgment, right? Or fear of what other
Your head chopped off.
Think or say. Yeah, exactly. So one of the practices that I do, and I have everyone do, I absolutely love this one. It's called pride practice. And so rather than going into a safe container where you can actually process, metabolize, feel all of these backlogged emotions, we're actually setting up a different structure where we'll drop into the space, maybe do a little meditation practice to really feel the body, get present. And then we'll actually say a bunch of wins that have been happening in our life. And really in a way where we're not just saying it cognitively and getting through it as fast as possible, but saying it, taking a breath, feeling it in our body. And then after we share it and we've actually been received by somebody else, that person reflects it back to us and actually says, wow, I heard you say that, like this, and that happened. And like, how amazing is that? And there's something interesting that happens when we actually hear it reflected back to us. It like hits a different place in the system where it's like, whoa, like, wow, I really did do these things. And I shared it and I'm still in connection with you. And we actually pause and recognize, wow, this person is still sitting here with me. And we get to feel that they're celebrating. We get to feel that there's no judgment. And so it starts to repair the place inside of us that believes, based on the past, that whenever we're celebrating a win, we're going to be cut down. And the more that repairs internally, because we're building new evidence through these experiences over and over again that we're creating like a practice from. Now, this trust is earned moment to moment, moment to moment. And so we have repetition, and the trust builds not with other women or other people, but it builds within ourselves. And when that trust builds within ourselves, and we actually feel like truly through the body that it is safe to celebrate and it's safe to live in these like bigger realities, then we start to embody a place where it doesn't matter what other people think. It really doesn't matter, because there's such a security and ground in like, I'm living what's in alignment to my soul, you know? And so even if there is criticism or misunderstanding or whatever, it doesn't impact the same way. And we actually even stop creating those circumstances or realities, you know, like those circumstances start showing up less and less and less and less, because it's not in our awareness anymore. If we're feeling really, really clear in our system around what it is we're doing on this planet and what we are deserving of, what is our birthright, right? Like to live in an abundant consciousness, to feel grounded in our expression, whether that expression isn't in alignment with somebody else's or not. If it's aligned to our soul, then there's there's a resonance in that, and we can begin to make that our everyday reality. Yeah,
I love that. That's that piece that you're talking about also of acclimating and getting comfortable with the good, you know, the next level. And it's like the more we have that as a daily practice, the easier it will be to accept it when it comes. Because for people that understand the subconscious mind, you can call it in all you want and manifest it all you want, and it'll show up, and it won't stay unless you've done the energy shift, like you're talking about, attracting your partner, your romantic partner too. And it'll go away because you can't accept it, you can't receive it. And so getting into a daily practice of receiving the good, and it is a nervous system thing, because it is endorphins, and it is, you know, oxytocin when you're bonding with another person, and it is dopamine of like the excitement of feeling good. Like you said, it hits different when somebody's like repeating what you just said, or reframing it, or saying wow, like celebrating with you, and just like giving you like double praise for the way that you just praised yourself, you know, like it's really phenomenal, and it doesn't hurt anything. And I think as a culture, we're so worried about being, especially as women, we're so worried about being narcissistic, or we're so worried about like thinking that we're special. And I grew up in the Midwest, and that's one thing you don't do is like brag, or, you know, you're supposed to be very humble and all of this stuff. And you know, arrogance is like really punished and looked down upon. And it's not arrogance though, it's like a healthy narcissism. And Dr. Mario Martinez taught me this, the author of the Mind Body Code. He was on a episode where we talked about shame and how it impacts the immune system, because he and I both work in the field of psychoneuroimmunology. And he said that in his work of researching healthy centenarians, people who have lived over 100 years old, they have, you know, a handful of things in common. He's found across all these different cultures. And one of the things that they have in common is that they have this healthy narcissism. And they're like, I'm awesome. Like, I did this well. I'm so good at this. Like, this is incredible. Like, and so are you. You know, so it's like, can you have this like positive regard for yourself, and make, like you said, make yourself find everything right about you? Can you get in the practice of finding everything right about you, and then also sharing it and seeing it with others? And sometimes we forget about that piece of, because we're like, of course you are too, but we don't say it, right? And then it comes across differently. So I think that's the other piece of being in a community where we get to be in a culture of celebrating everybody. And it's just, and it does again relate to sexuality too, because the more you can tolerate those endorphins flowing in. And I say tolerate, it sounds so ridiculous, but
no, it actually feels like the right word.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it is tolerate, because we will reach for pleasure, whether it's momentary, that saying, a moment on the lips, forever on the hips. I used to have people saying that to me. That's a messed up diet culture. But I used to have people saying that to me all the time when I was a teenager. But whether it's a temporary pleasure, or it's a, like something considered naughty or bad, or something that's considered healthy pleasure, it's still something we normally reach for when we're not feeling well, or we're trying to escape pain, or we're trying to escape anxiety, or some kind of nervous system provocation. But how often do we reach for pleasure when we're already feeling normal, or, like you said, everything was going great in your relationship, and then all of a sudden you had this awareness of feeling deeply held and seen and adored. And then you went from normal to like extraordinary. And all of a sudden the body's like, whoa, whoa, red alert, red alert, red alert, And it's like, it's not common for us to reach for pleasure when we're just feeling okay. We're like, oh, I'm fine the way that I am. And sometimes it's not even knowing what we want. I've been struggling with that the last 9 months, after going through a pretty, really like a breakup that really crushed my spirit in a lot of ways, and my heart. It was a total flip from how I thought life was going to go.
Yeah.
And so life once again got turned upside down. Now when I talk to people that are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, they're like, yeah, that's life. That's just the definition of life. You're doing this, and then it flips upside down, and then you start over again, and then it flips upside down, and then you start. I'm like, okay, thanks for normalizing that, because I've been through a lot of flips already. But post flip, you're like, geez, what do I even want?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to. You can even be a little traumatized of having a desire, because it was there, and then it went poof, and it went away. And I guess this could also be, these upper limit issues. If you haven't like figured out what is getting these things not to stick, so you keep having this repeated experience of almost having what you desire, and then it just slips away. It can be kind of a trauma. So just being in this phase of limbo. And of course the astrology has been wild lately too, so it's like nothing is sticking, like, for anybody, because of all the weird stuff. I mean, I don't want to say nothing, but it's been a non-sticky time basically. Now we're moving into the grounding and the stickiness, but and the expansion and all the good stuff coming. But for a while things have not been certain, and so not even having those desires or knowing what to desire is a form of difficulty reaching to the upper limit, or the difficulty to reach for pleasure.
Yeah, to me, being in the place of unknown, like really having no idea, after there's been like this deconstruction of a reality that felt familiar, being in the unknown space, even though it can be really uncomfortable, is such a beautiful place to be, because from there it's like a blank canvas, and we're not being it's like we don't have all these other things of like how it should be, what we should do. All the things that we've been gripping to are in this like weird transitional place where they've all kind of just like calmed. And now like we've set a new foundation, and from that place I feel like we can start to have like inspired action start to come through, if we can build our tolerance for actually resting in the unknown, right? Which that's a practice in and of itself.
Well, as you're talking, I'm just visualizing this caterpillar, right, in a cocoon, and turning into mush, like deconstructing and losing its body to be total mush. Like that's what happens, like after the pandemic, after the unknown, it's the mush. It's like we don't know what shape it's forming into, but on some level it knows that it's becoming a butterfly. It's transforming, it's becoming more free. It starts to form its little butterfly body and butterfly wings, and then you said until we start to figure out what's next, it's like you have to take aligned action. You have to like start, making the container a little bit bigger, like creating some space in that cocoon until finally your wing breaks it open, and then you're free. And that's that upper limit. It's a good metaphor for that upper limit issue, because if you have an upper limit issue, you're going to be like breaking out of that cocoon. You're like, oh, I can't fly, and flop to the ground. But nature doesn't do that. Butterflies, as far as I know, don't have subconscious minds, so they don't have the self-sabotage. So they just break on out of that cocoon and they start flying, and they go, they're solar powered. They go to every pretty flower. They follow their pleasure. They follow the sun. They're charged by the sun. They're charged by the light, and they follow their pleasure. And what do they end up doing? They end up pollinating, flowers and nature. It's just like the beautiful cycle of life that, we can remember who we are when we start to observe nature and get in nature. And again, like you said, just be. And that caterpillar mush, that's the surrender that you're talking about. That's the being and not the doing, and just being okay with not knowing. And I know that you said it is a very beautiful process, and it is, but it's scary, but it will force you into mindfulness. It'll force you into the present moment, because there's nowhere else to be. Nowhere else.
I mean, we're all on the path in some regard. So we can either go kicking and screaming, or we can go consciously. That's kind of how I hold it.
Yeah.
I think you just perfectly described the process of getting out of our own way. When we actually just surrender to the moment and we let ourselves view whatever is happening with curiosity, rather than like this lens of like, I need to figure this out. I got to control it. I need it to be how it was, or I have an exact plan for how it should be. And the more we can allow that to begin to rest by inputting this energy of curiosity, the easier things get for us. Like we really start to open up that pathway or break through the cocoon for something to emerge that maybe is even like more extraordinary than any reality we could have planned for ourselves. But it happens from getting out of our own way and being intimate with the present moment, whether that's a feeling that's deeply uncomfortable, or whether that's a win that we're celebrating. And maybe there's even discomfort in that, right? That we have to unbind from the actual joy of the experience. And it comes from not, telling ourselves like, oh man, like I'm going to competition, or oh man, like I hate that I can't like feel good about what I'm doing or share what I'm doing without feeling shame. It's more like, oh wow, I actually notice that maybe there's shame alive in me from conditioning of my past. Like that's okay that that's here. There's a reason it showed up, because I'm a creature of belonging. And if I was given a choice at some point in life to belong with social norms and stay in connection, or celebrate what's good in my autonomous nature and what I'm here to express, we're going to choose belonging every time as we're growing up. It's biological. So that's why it feels so uncomfortable when we start to come into these higher grounds or break through these upper limits, because there's a conflict between our mind and our primal body. And the way through, it's like we break through all of that by saying, yes, this is here. Shame is here. Fear is here. Discomfort is here. I'm going to let myself feel that. And the more we let ourselves feel it, we unbind ourselves from the experience, because there's nothing resisting it anymore. It can metabolize, it can digest. And so I found like every time I hit a new limit in my relationship, in my business, in my finances, I now have an expectation in my system that like, I'm probably going to hit some stuff and I'm going to hit some emotions. So to me, it's not scary anymore. I've built so much trust in my system that I actually get excited. What's that?
Well bragged.
Totally. Yeah. And it's like, it gets easier. So even if like, I'm hitting a new like threshold or whatever it is, like if I feel like the other day something happened and it was so exciting, and I went from celebrating to like deep fear and sadness within a second, and was like, wow, that was interesting. Can you hold space for me? I like looked to my fiance at the time, and he's like, yeah, sure. We took 5 minutes. We set a timer, and I was like, like just started crying, right? Because I've built an allowance of fluidity in my emotional system where if it's there, I'll just go into it. And within 5 minutes, it had processed all the way through, and I was like, back at it, gonna go take more action in my life. And it gets to be that easy when we set up consistency of practice and the trust is built. Like it can be so easy. It doesn't have to be this hard, scary thing, you know?
Consistency of practice and the container. And I mean, what you're talking about, this is high level skill, right? That I would say majority of relationships don't have, because you don't learn this stuff until you learn it, until you go consciously educate yourself on it. And it can be, once you work the tools, and like you're saying, you've built it in, now it's just regular. It's kind of like when I go to the grocery store, I don't really buy sweets anymore because I've trained myself to, after all the years of like, just get the healthy stuff, and now I just don't even think about it. I get the healthy stuff. But yeah, and I hear you saying too, when the emotions come up, and I would say this with the complaining that I was talking about earlier, put a time limit on it, give it a container, because you can't just pretend it's not there. It's in your body. You have to get it out. You have to move it through. And that's the process of digesting it. But it doesn't like come out to like sabotage every happy moment of the day throughout the day, never ending. And that's the complaint I think that men have sometimes. So it can be as simple as when it's, when it is their wife or their girlfriend that they feel like is complaining all the time, hold some space for, like you said, you ask for space. Can you hold space? That's the permission, informed consent. Then you go into the event or whatever.
Yeah. And I think also the partner or the other person has to be resourced and capable of holding space in that moment. So what we've found is that we can't be everything for each other. It's not plausible. And I think a lot of couples fall into that pattern where there's a subconscious expectation. They need their partners to be everything. So there's a lot of times, I'm kind of speaking to the good moments, but there are a lot of times when that's not accessible. Like he's in something that's alive for him, or let's say we're tired and we're exhausted and we've had a hard day or whatever it is. There are moments when I or he will say, no, actually, I can't do that for you right now. I'm sorry. And so we'll reach out to other people in our network to be able to be present for us. And I don't think, to me, I'm like, I don't know how relationships work without this, because we are hardwired for trial. We don't know.
They don't. That's how we end up with things like affairs and shadow polyamory and alcoholism. And, it's like, they don't work without that. You have to have those tools, and you have to be, like you said, the nervous system has to be regulated in order for you to hear somebody else's triggers. And that can go with all these talks about BLM and racism and patriarchy, all these things. Like you cannot hear another person's oppression or pain unless you're coming at it with your own regulated nervous system. And then we get mad at each other for not being able to see each other, hear each other. And we just realize that our nervous systems are like bouncing back and forth. Right. And I feel like, it's just like emotions are energy, money is energy, all of these things, it's all energy. And so you can't hold space unless you're in overflow. You can't hold space unless you're in overflow. So how do you get into overflow? How realistic is it that you don't experience any stress? How realistic is it that life is easy? It's just not realistic. There's always going to be stress. So we have to find ways to manage it on our own. That's our own personal responsibility, so that we can stay in a state of overflow. Like you said, doing the practices of feeling the endorphins, the pleasure, the celebrations, the wins, all of that stuff keeps us higher, so that we can overflow now and hold space for others. And then we go through seasons of life or people that have so much unhealed trauma, they're never in overflow. And then they're not capable to have a healthy relationship at that point, in my opinion, because there's no reciprocity. Unless they have a very understanding partner, or maybe they have that history together where it can be lopsided for a long while until that person can get resourced, or, that's when, I guess, when it's lopsided, you need professional help to go to somebody outside of your relationship that can then give you their overflow, because you're paying them. So that's how they, and then they're professional energy transmitters, so they know how to not take it on as their own stuff. But this is the stuff, I don't think most people realize when they're because we, again, like you were saying in the beginning, we tend to stay at the surface level until we can start to have that awareness or see things in a deeper level.
Yeah, it's like we don't know what we don't know, until there's a driver that emerges. And for me, it was, this is where intention comes in. So even if we don't know what's wrong or how to move through something, we have the capacity to set intention. And to me, it's like that self-responsibility. So we can make a decision, a declaration for health, for intimacy and relationship, for financial abundance, whatever it is. I think it starts with the intention, and that actually starts to align reality, to bring us the resources, to bring us the experience, the support, whatever it is that we need in order to move through a lot of the blocks that we've created in some way, or unconsciously have become a part of our structures, our body, our being, from trauma in the past, or from not getting our needs met when we're younger.
Yeah. And like you said, about if we're going to choose between, being accepted or I don't know what you said, I don't remember the exact word is that you said of, maybe it was like telling your truth or something like that.
Yeah, like being autonomous expression.
Autonomous expression. Yeah, exactly. It's that balance between, like autonomy and connection. And I think that is a lifelong pursuit, like a lifelong balance that we don't ever arrive really there. It's a constant maintenance, just like your pool needs maintenance or your plants need maintenance or whatever. You can grow them and they can get nice and healthy, but we're constantly having to look at that balance between connection and autonomy. And keeping that balance is what, again, keeps relationships passionate. Because if we're always looking at connection, now we've developed codependency, smothering, passion goes away. Again, affairs can happen because one person can feel smothered and too close, and they try to go outside of the relationship. And then too much autonomy, that's when you have that avoidant attachment style, like they're going to have it their way, and the other person is feeling chronically left out or not having their needs met, or there's isolation. And even the person that's like out here being autonomous is often isolated or overly independent, or doesn't have that, again, community or tribe. It's always coming back to that. But Dr. Murray Bowen talked about this family systems theory, and the key to balancing that autonomy and that connection is balancing your emotions and your thoughts. So being able to stay rational and logical, but then also feel your feelings and understand this mind-body connection, and that energy travels through generations and systems in the family, again, like with the triangles. And if you could have an issue that comes from, well, in body code sessions, I've had issues that have cleared that were from 17 generations past. I'm like, gosh, what was my family looking like 17 where were they even? I don't even know. 17 generations, that's a long time. That's a long time to transmit an energy pattern and not have it cleared. But that's how it works until we get to the bottom of this stuff. It just takes one person to do things differently. And I think that's really what we're talking about here, is when we reach that upper limit of like evolution, whether for your whole family, your ancestral lineage, or your own nervous system, it's doing something different than what you were as your knee-jerk response or your program conditions. So I just, this has been a really fascinating and powerful conversation. I'm so glad that we were finally able to make this show happen. And I also know that you have a couple offerings. One is I think it's like an ebook or something that people can sign up for on your website, and then you're creating a course coming up soon. So it'd probably be great for them to get connected with you so that they know when that's coming out.
Yeah, we've touched a little bit on it too in our conversation, but it's basically just a deep dive, the course that I'm creating, on the process, like the actual structural process that we can go into to come into a really healthy relationship with our emotional system. so we can create that sense of ease and effortlessness and flow in relationship to all aspects of our life. And it's really about self-empowerment, right? How do we actually take back the power of our lives rather than living in like a victim mentality or feeling at the mercy to our circumstance? So I'm really excited about that.
Me too. I mean, so needed in the world. We're ripe for it right now. We were before the pandemic, and now especially so. And you know, you heal this stuff, you can heal relationships. People want to know, you know, why they can't stay in love, why they can't make their relationships work. I think this is it. You know, this is like a big, huge piece underlying all the other. It's the roots, you know, that are underlying all the different leaves of issues on the tree. It's like getting to the nervous system, which looks like roots, right? Moving through the body. I also want to invite our listeners out to, there's lots of different community gatherings. My co-host Kirti does a full moon online gathering, a new moon in person, which Felicia, I would love for you to come sometime, Creativity Consciousness, since you're local.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, you and your fiance are invited to that, where these are some spaces, and then there's a Kirti also does movement medicine, which is every Sunday dancing in the trees and the grass, which is really powerful for transmuting energy. So for all of our listeners, I want to also invite you to those in-person events if you're looking for groups that we're talking about that celebrate and lift you higher and allow you to shine and all of that are very safe and supportive. And help you transform some of this stuff. And then, of course, I have my yearly course, Inclusion, that I do with Shofar, who introduced you and I, Felicia. So he and I do, he's the energy medicine guy, and I'm the trauma lady. And we do this somatic practices right there in the moment. So if you feel like you need, it sounds like it's a lot of overlap to the same theories that you're working with in your course. So it's just a matter of if people find it easier to access a course, a written course, so that they can do self-paced, or if they need the accountability of the group. And it's not in person, it's on Zoom. It's in person and on Zoom, just like we are right now. So lots of resources for y'all. And anything else that you would add, Felicia, before we end?
There was one last piece that was coming through. I forget what you shared before, but just to me, it's like there's really a Goldilocks place that we can rest in our life experience, where we don't have to choose between connection and being who we are. I think there is a third option. I know there's a third option where there can really be the both. And it doesn't mean we're going to rest perfectly in that place. I think it's a process of coming back to that. But in our true nature, I think when we are fully expressed, a part of that expression is resting in inner connection, where other beings can be fully present with us as well. And we can be fully present with them and not lose who we are. And so it's like a process of returning and remembering. And I think it gets better every step of the way. And you're right, I think it's a lifelong journey. And, you know, it's not about a destination for life to be really good. It's like every moment we get to experience the bothness. It's like the better it gets, the better it gets.
You get more and more skilled at it, just like you're talking about with your relationship skills that that are practiced. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, now that we healed the planet, I guess we can go to sleep now.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, it was really a pleasure. I hope we can do another episode in the future, and I hope to meet you in person sometime soon. We're so close.
I know. We'll make it happen.
It'll align. One of these days I'll like run into you at the beach or something.
Yeah.
You know, that's how it usually works.
Yeah, totally.
The universe has a better scheduler than we could ever plan. All right. Well, thank you, Felicia. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If you loved this episode and you had some ahas, you know, I always love it when you text me, email me, DM me on Instagram, comment below. I always love hearing your feedback. It just charges me up. Of course, we don't get paid to do these. We pay to broadcast, and it's our pleasure to come and talk about these things and share. And we just love it so much when we know that we've stimulated you or touched your heart or opened your mind in some way. So feel free to send that, what do we call it? The healthy encouragement to us too. Yeah, this is an open community. All right. Good night, everyone.